Be found on page 1241 in your Bible, page 1241. It's from the Gospel of John, chapter 6, beginning with verse 1, page 1241. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that are left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. The Gospel of the Lord. This story of the multiplication of the loaves takes place in all 4 of the Gospels, and we've heard it many, many times before. We're not quite sure exactly how this happened. I grew up picturing it as kind of like the magic act that I used to see when I was a kid, when the magician would come and we would see him pull rabbits out of hats and do marvelous things. And it's as though Jesus worked magic, but it wasn't magic, it was miracle. Miracle. Probably he just kept breaking off bread and handing it to people, and breaking off bread and handing it to more people, and breaking off more bread, and it just never ran out. Probably the miracle was something like that. There's another view, which I kind of like, but I'm not sure it's very accurate, possible. And that is that people were wearing robes in those days, something like what I got on here. And you never know what they had inside those robes. They may have had stuff in there. It's not likely that they left home without anything. I know lots of people who travel, they have to have food when they travel. Something in the car to nibble on, munch on all the time, so they won't go hungry. And it's quite possible that these people had a few things stuffed in there, but they were afraid to bring them out because if I brought out a loaf of bread, loaf was probably just a little roll kind of a thing, the guy next to me might say, "Ooh, can I have some of that?" And the guy on this side might say, "Ooh, I'd like some too," and pretty soon it would be gone before I even had a bite. And so I would, being on the selfish side, I would be afraid to share. And so maybe when this kid came forward with 5 barley loaves and a couple of fish, Jesus says, "Aha, folks, This boy was willing to share everything he had. So sit down, and how about sharing what you have with one another? And people reached inside these robes, and they pulled out stuff like, that's a wineskin, if you don't know what that is. I just carry this around all the time. Actually, it's from the old days when I used to ski and figured I needed some liquid nourishment as I was going up the lift. And probably they had a few rolls in there and things they brought out and started sharing with one another. Pretty soon, there was lots of food. It was like a potluck, but no pot, just lots of food. Now, maybe that's what happened, I don't know. But somehow Jesus made sure that everybody had enough to eat because he was concerned about the welfare of all his people. But it was that kid, that boy, that made the first move that said, here's some food. And everybody said, oh. Some of them probably said, wait till he grows up and learns how to keep his mouth shut. But he didn't. And Jesus took that and said, as he has shared, let's all share. Who knows how this story really happened? We'll have to ask Jesus when we get there. But the point is, he was the first to offer. And Jesus rewarded the people with abundance. 20 baskets left over, 12 baskets left over. The other day I was riding out of town, up First Avenue all the way to St. James Parish, where I picked up Father Deach and went off to Jasper and eventually to Patoka Lake. And the hills were just full of green. They were full of food, full of corn, full of beans. Everywhere you looked, there was just food all over the place. Beautiful, green. It was so beautiful. It was so abundant. And you think, with all this food, we could feed the world for a year. Except there are people going hungry, people starving to death, or people just hungry all the time. People who live in strange places where they are oppressed and don't have the means somehow to take care of themselves. So I think there are various lessons in here about how can we share what we have to make sure people have enough to eat. Maybe we need to change the politics of some of this world of ours so that the food can get distributed, because we throw a lot of stuff away. There's really enough food. Just how do we get it where it should go? And what can we do, like work in the soup kitchen, food pantries, work through the Vincent de Paul Society, work to change things through justice work so that people have enough work so that they can buy food? How can you take what little you have, what little I have, how can we share this to start a movement so that there is enough for all?